a good friend of the show for a long time now. We go back to the SB Nation days, and now he's been at ESPN for quite some time, dominating the dojo. Bill Connely, the creator of SP Plus, the new 2024 SP Plus rankings are out at ESPN.com. We also tweeted it out at Dirt and Sprague, the show page on Twitter. I think Bill retweeted, so thanks to Bill on that. And he's on Twitter at ESPN_Bill C. Bill, good morning. Welcome back to the States. SP Plus 2024, baby! How we feeling?
That's right. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
Well, hey, we're in love. We're in love with college football here. When you sit down to write this every year, the very first new rankings of a year, how are you feeling when you sit down to write the new rankings?
I mean, it's nice to have those, mile posts throughout the year. You know exactly what time of year it is based on what you're doing, and I mean, it's kind of neat. I mean, for all the changes that have happened to the sport and are about to happen this coming fall, the way to project quality hasn't really changed all that much. I've had to change based on transfer stuff, but it's still a semi-reliable process, and it is, just kind of fun. I like doing it. I like looking forward. It's, it's been a month since we've had college football. It's time to start looking ahead to the next season.
Well, that's the thing, Bill. I feel like a couple years ago, and maybe it's been longer than that, but I remember talking to our boss, and I think it was like March or April, and I'm like, college football's, it's the NFL. It's year-round now. Like, there's all of these things that are happening, and so it's become almost a 12-month sport, not just, hey, the season's here, it dies for a while, then spring, and then it dies again. It's just constantly moving, coaching changes. You mentioned the portal. I know you're a numbers guy, Bill, and small sample size is maybe not the best way to measure these things, but I am curious because you cited it there. How has the portal changed the way some of these numbers look? Like you say, it hasn't dictated too much. I'm just curious what you're seeing with the numbers where transfer portal, it's the controversy of they're not sure EA is going to be able to make the video game because the portal is always moving and players are moving. Right. And it's hard to keep up. What are the numbers saying about the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mean, that part, SP Plus is basically, the projections are based off of three things. There's the returning production part, the recruiting rankings part, and the just recent history part. And, the last couple of years, what I've seen is, I mean, every offseason I look back at the weighting of everything that I do and try to fiddle with, how would this have worked best last year? And it's, there's a little retrofitting involved there, but, basically the weights have shifted, number one, obviously towards the returning production part. Like, the recruiting rankings aren't quite as important because you can go about building quality in other ways. So that's one. They're still in there, but it's not as much of as heavy a weight. And what I've learned is, you got to account for the recruiting rankings of the transfers themselves. That helped a little bit. And then just, what I've always done with transfers and what I just have to do like 50 times more now is take your production at your last school and cram it into the returning production formula for your new school. Like, at Georgia, Trevor Etienne from Florida is now part of their returning production. DJ Uiagalelei is now part of Florida State's returning production. That's just kind of, it works relatively well. And it did, Colorado obviously was the big test last year, and it did at the end, it had done a really solid job of projecting Colorado's quality, so to speak, or I guess lack thereof. And that was kind of, that's a very small sample of one team, but I was happy to see that. So I do think things have changed, but they're still, those three components are still how you go about predicting a college football team.
College football 2024 preseason SP Plus rankings coming out today. ESPN.com is where you can find them. Bill Connely is our guest here. He is the creator of it, and the new rankings are out, so we wanted to try to get Bill on. He just got back stateside, so we're excited to have him here. Oregon comes in for you at number 3 of the SP Plus. Well, not for you, for the numbers. Oregon is at number 3. Number 1 offensively on SP Plus, 15th defensively SP Plus. I'm curious, is that about, because Duck fans want the title. Dan Lanning stays in Eugene. He wants a title. They're going to the Big Ten now. When you look at teams that typically win this thing, and I know there's more parity in the sense of, well, where the portal helps, but we still have our traditional powers here. If Oregon wants to take that leap this year, first going into the season and 15th on defense, is that pretty normal for teams that are kind of in the situation of or in the position of winning a championship?
Yeah, I mean, having that balance, top 15 on both sides, that is kind of, I'm trying to think back to the rankings of recent champions. I mean, Georgia was going to be, top 3 defensively and probably top 10 or 12 offensively. When they won, I think last year, Michigan was certainly top 10 in both. So maybe you could make a case that the defense needs to be a little better, especially since, changing quarterbacks, even with what, bringing in Dylan Gabriel and whatnot, losing your starting quarterback, but still being projected first in offense. That is kind of, that's a leap of faith right there. So maybe they're only a top 5 offense and the defense needs to be better. So that's certainly going to be an interesting thing to watch with Oregon. But I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from seeing them that ranked that high is they were that high last year. They finished last season 3rd in SP plus. And obviously plenty of Washington fans yelled at me about that, but as strange as it is to try to make this argument, I think Oregon was for all but about 2 weeks last year a better team than Washington. It was just the wrong 2 weeks that they couldn't keep, that kind of held them back. So they were an astoundingly good team last year, really, really, really solid. When they won, they usually dominated. And they returned, obviously not the quarterback, but they returned plenty of the reasons for that domination. It's just, I'm much more. It's going to be hard to have the best offense with a change in quarterbacks. That defense is going to be kind of is going to bear a lot of expectation, we'll say.
I want to ask about Oregon State, Bill, but I just, when you watched them, I know your take and the numbers can be different here, but when you watched them versus what the numbers were saying they were, is it just boiled down to you as luck? Like we talked after that first Washington game, you just didn't capitalize on 4th down conversions. You probably win the game if you do, but they were unsuccessful in crucial moments. Is it boiled down to luck, or was it something you were seeing that maybe the numbers don't see when you see Oregon saying, oh, they rank here, but they're not winning these couple of games?
No, I mean, the first game was just as much of a toss-up as you could possibly think of, right down to the field goal to send it in overtime at the end. I mean, that was, when 2 teams are even, one of them still ends up winning. And I think that was what that first game said. Now, the reason the rankings, Washington ended up so far separated from Oregon was because after that game, they really, whether it was because of injuries, whether it was because of whatever, they faded quite a bit. They had to beat a bunch of average to above average teams in late with but by 1 score and whatnot. Needed a pick 6 to beat what ended up being a bad Arizona State team, and their ranking really kind of stumbled from that point forward. But then they meet in the Pac-12 championship, play basically a perfect first quarter, and then just kind of ride it out. And so Washington timed its moments better, and I think close games are hard because they're part quarterback and coaching and special teams and that kind of stuff, and they are part absolute randomness, and it's hard to separate one from the other. But seeing what we know about Michael Penix Jr. and late game execution, Washington certainly had a good close game recipe last year, and they took advantage of it. I just think top to bottom, if they played, best of 7, I think even down 0-2, I still might have picked Oregon in a best of 7.
Oregon State, I scrolled down a little bit. Oregon State's at 44. They're obviously starting with a new regime here. Jonathan Smith goes to Michigan State. Trent Bray fills in, their D coordinator, now the head coach. They've got a lot of ties of former players and people familiar with Corvallis coaching on that staff now. And I know the numbers say 44. I'm curious just your thoughts of kind of a pseudo Mountain West schedule now, and how a team that comes in at 44 can maybe go higher in the actual rankings, despite what SP Plus says, given strength of schedule.
Yeah, looking at the schedule, they're a projected underdog, or they're a projected favorite, I should say, in 9 of 12 games. Obviously, the Oregon game is going to be tough with Oregon projected 3rd, but otherwise, like just 1.5 points at California and basically 1 point at Boise. So if they figure out the quarterback situation, I really like that Giovanni McCoy kid. Idaho was a team that I watched a shocking amount of last year. They're just really, really fun to watch. But they have, part of a pretty good offensive line coming back. They got if Martinez is, I love Martinez. The defense is going to be tricky. That was a lot to lose on defense.
Yeah.
And obviously when you look at the breakout, they're in the mid 40s. The offense is in the 30s, but the defense is in the 60s after a couple of really good years defensively, which tells you how much they lost. It is going to be, there's plenty of upside to this schedule. Obviously it's just going to be kind of a, where's everybody's head? What are the motivation levels? Because obviously the biggest loss of this last season had nothing to do with anything on the football field, and we'll see exactly. Can you turn that into some massive motivation, prove everybody wrong thing, or does it just kind of negativity overtake the program with all the change? So that's the biggest question for me. The numbers make sense, but we'll see how that goes.
Bill, just to get you out of here on this one, because we appreciate the time. Of the top 25 teams, Wisconsin's the 25th team, and then it goes up, and a lot of the usual players are in that ranking. Was there one that surprised you, or one that you're looking at saying, I think their numbers can change enough to put them in a conversation with an expanded playoff? They can maybe take a leap and get in that conversation.
Yeah, I think, even though I knew that they were second in returning production, seeing Iowa State at 22nd kind of threw me off a little bit. It did remind me that for a little while now, Matt Campbell's biggest problem has been that he never wins close games. Because if they were to have won a couple more toss-ups last year, they would have been kind of a top 25 team, and now they return a lot of players. So that was kind of interesting to me. But I do think, there's this huge, Georgia's way out ahead of the pack. And then you kind of know who's going to be next in SP Plus or polls or anything else. Some mix of Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Michigan, and Alabama are going to be up there. But I do think what was most interesting to me looking at the list was, from, number 16 up to about number 8 or so. It's basically a touchdowns difference. There are a ton of teams, whether it's like a Texas A&M that gets a little bit new leadership, whether it's an Ole Miss that kind of went all in on this year. There are a lot of teams that could make a run pretty easily. And that's kind of, in a 12-team era, that's what you want to see. You want 30 teams starting off with legit playoff hopes, and at least 10 or so thinking they could make a run at the title. And I think we might have that this year, and we'll see how that goes.
Bill Connely, the master and creator of SP Plus, ESPN.com. The 2024 preseason rankings drop today. ESPN.com is where you can find it, and you can find Bill on Twitter at ESPN_Bill C. Just got back stateside. Looked like a great trip, man. Welcome back. And welcome back, college football. Thanks for hopping on with us. We always appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, there we go. Great stuff from our friend Bill Connely of ESPN. I get jacked for this stuff. I know it's preseason, long way away, but I'm still interested to see what the numbers are saying.